Manchester United are expected to make a formal offer to RB Leipzig for their striker Benjamin Sesko. Hi, good evening. Welcome along to the Transfer Show as United look to add forward number 3 this summer. So what does that mean for Rasmus Højlund? Well, Dharmesh Sheth and James Savundra are here to answer the questions tonight. We'll have the latest on Alexander Isak as he returns to Newcastle today. And Chelsea are aiming to make sure Alejandro Garnacho and Xavi Simons sign for them before the window closes. Right, loads to get into. Dharmesh, Benjamin Sesko, right? Man in demand. What's the latest development on him?
Yeah, this one looks like it is developing. Something's going to have to come to a head sooner rather than later with this one, you would think. Manchester United now expected to make a formal offer to RB Leipzig for their striker, Benjamin Sesko. They have been in talks, as we have been reporting on Sky Sports News, over what they would be prepared to pay for Benjamin Sesko. Remember, Newcastle United, they're in ongoing talks with RB Leipzig over the structure of their deal because they've already made an offer. They were the ones who made the first move. That deal was worth around £69.8 million all in, including performance-related add-ons. It should be said from the player's perspective, he hasn't made a decision yet. He's open to both projects, but one source, and I should reiterate this, only one source has told Sky Sports News that he's leaning towards Manchester United. That is if they can agree a deal, because it will all be a moot point if there's no agreement with either club, or if there's only agreement with one club, then RB Leipzig will clearly deal with that club. United's pursuit of Sesko, though, it could have ramifications, not least on one of their current strikers who, during the US tour, started a couple of games, was on the bench the other night, Rasmus Højlund.
And after that game against Bournemouth, he spoke to the media. He went out of his way to speak to the media in the mix zone, Rasmus Højlund, after scoring against Bournemouth. And he said he wants to stay and fight for his place. Ruben Amorim, speaking ahead of that match, said he's really happy with Rasmus Højlund, but he doesn't know what's going to happen in this transfer window. We understand, though, that Manchester United are willing to listen to suitable offers for Rasmus Højlund in this transfer window. We know that Manchester United are prioritising sales in this transfer window. They can sign Benjamin Sesko without making sales, but then they'd need to make sales after bringing him into the football club. So for Rasmus Højlund, let's bear in mind he's had 2 difficult years at United. United aren't in Europe next season. There are going to be very limited options. If they sign another number 9, 2 number 9s, there's not going to be a lot of football there, especially when you consider the likes of Matheus Cunha, Brian Mbeumo can play up front as well. If United do sign Sesko, it does feel like Rasmus Højlund's days are potentially numbered at the football club, which will be a disappointment for him because he signed for £72 million. It'll be a disappointment for the club as well because they're likely to make a loss on him. He signed a 5-year contract after that £72 million deal was signed with Atlanta. It means his book value is currently around £43 million. It's been reported elsewhere United would look for at least £30 million to sign him. So it looks like if they're to let him go, it would come at a loss.
One thing I would say quickly, Mike, on Rasmus Højlund is, in defence of him, in one way, when he joined the club, he was slightly injured. He didn't have a pre-season in his first season when he joined. I think his debut was against Arsenal. He came off the bench at the Emirates and he looked pretty dangerous. His second season, he was actually looking really, really sharp in pre-season until he picked up quite a bad hamstring injury, which meant he missed the rest of pre-season and again was playing catch-up at the start of last season and then rejoined later on. This time, when there's all this talk about Rasmus Højlund potentially going and Manchester United potentially considering suitable offers, he's had a good pre-season and he's looked pretty sharp. And even Ruben Amorim has said he's starting to learn what I want from him and he's been really, really good in these games.
Struggled at the end of last season though, didn't he? Really struggled. A quick line that you said, that if they could bring in someone like Sesko, let's say Sesko, but they don't have to sell beforehand. But if they do that, aren't they just alerting any other club that they can get Man United players on the cheap?
I think that Manchester United are aware that the clubs are aware of this situation already because it's clear, despite the fact Ruben Amorim said that these players, and there's 4 of them right now who aren't training with the first team, aren't in the US with the squad, that they are surplus to requirements and the club and the players actively looking to move away. So yes, it does somehow make their their situation from a negotiating point of view more difficult. But if it means they can get in Benjamin Sesko for the start of the season, it means they take a slight hit on the fee they're going to get for the likes of Jadon Sancho, Alejandro Garnacho, Anthony Terrell Malacia. Those are 4 players we know are definitely looking for moves away. Rasmus Højlund potentially one as well. I do understand where you're coming from, but for United, it makes more sense to try and bring in this player now so he can have a little bit of a pre-season, train with the first team to ideally be in that matchday squad for that first game against Arsenal on the Super Sunday.
Yeah, I wonder whether United are just trying to do a reset now, because are they willing to start taking hits on players? I can compare it to maybe if you look at when Mikel Arteta took over at Arsenal. They were not in a good way. I think his first season they finished 8th. They didn't make the Champions League in his second season. But they made a decision as a football club that some of the players that were no longer going to be part of Mikel Arteta and Arsenal's future, however much they could have got for them, they just said, right, sometimes it's going to be a mutual termination of a contract.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're going to have to take much, much less than what we wanted for them and probably what their market value is, but just so that they can move on. Are Manchester United thinking like that?
Yeah, we'll discuss more of that at 7 o'clock in the hour-long transfer show. I want to talk Alexander Isak. James, we spotted him today. Well, we spotted his car and him in it. Where are we with him?
Yeah, he's been at the Newcastle training ground today. We understand he was there for around 3 hours, and it comes after he had his own personal training camp in Spain at his old club, Real Sociedad, and it comes in the days that have followed Liverpool putting in a bid to Newcastle, a bid worth more than £100 million. That was rejected. We understand that Isak was receiving treatment on a thigh injury. None of the first team players were there because they're still recovering from their trip to South Korea. Newcastle, they do not want to sell him in this transfer window. They value him at £150 million. We're waiting to see if Liverpool come back in with another offer. It was really interesting to hear from Eddie Howe before they left South Korea. Some comments he made just before he left. He said, "You have to earn the right to train with us. The player has a responsibility to be part of a team and part of a squad. You have to act in the right way." And this comes after Isak told Newcastle last month he'd like to explore his options in this transfer window. Newcastle will not let Alexander Isak go unless they have a replacement lined up. And that is why the deal with Benjamin Sesko, whether he goes to Newcastle, whether he goes to Manchester United, whether he stays at RB Leipzig, whether he goes elsewhere, is so significant when it comes to Alexander Isak as well.
All right, let's talk a possible replacement then. We know that, as Darmish said, Newcastle interested in Benjamin Sesko. What's going on with Johan Wissa?
This one is pretty unsavoury at the moment, but as far as Brentford are concerned, they're expecting Johan Wissa to be training tomorrow with the rest of the squad. They've had a day off today. They had a pre-season friendly over the weekend. They're back in training tomorrow. However, one source has told us at Sky Sports News that Wissa himself has got no intention of playing for Brentford again. He wants Brentford and Newcastle to come together and finalise this deal where he will get what he perceives as his dream move from Brentford to Newcastle United. Look, earlier in this transfer window, there was an insistence almost from Brentford that this player is not for sale. However, that goalpost seems to have moved ever so slightly because we think Brentford would do business on Johan Wissa, provided, it is a big proviso, admittedly, that they bring in a suitable replacement. They do not want to be in a position where Brian Mbeumo leaves Brentford and Johan Wissa leaves Brentford in the same transfer window. Replacing that amount of goals and what they bring to the team is going to be so difficult. They are, however, looking at other targets. Amari Hutchinson is a player that they've been trying to sign for the entire transfer window from Ipswich Town, and there are other targets that they are looking at in the case that Johan Wissa was to leave.
Is Darwin Núñez going to leave Liverpool?
If you're a betting man, I think you suggest that it's probably likely, but in terms of what he's doing right now, he's starting for Liverpool at Anfield in the first of 2 pre-season matches against Athletic Club, and 2 minutes ago, he scored at Anfield for Liverpool. Now, AC Milan have made an initial approach to Liverpool for Darwin. They're trying to sign him. Contact has now been made between the clubs. There's been interest from clubs in Italy. There's been interest from clubs in Saudi Arabia as well. AC Milan yet to make an offer. There are clubs like Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia who I think would love to sign him. We understand, though, that his preference would be to move to Spain or to a club in Europe rather than move to the Saudi Pro League at this point in his career. Al Hilal, they've yet to make a bid. Important to state here, he's still got 3 years left in his contract. The deal he signed when Liverpool signed him it could rise to £85 million. So you understand they want to make some decent money on a player who I think it's likely they'll make a loss on. If they are to sign Alexander Isak, you'd think he becomes third choice striker. I think his days are now numbered. I don't think Liverpool wanted to sell Luis Diaz. I think Arne Slot's probably looked at Darwin Nunez. Yes, he scored some important goals for them last season, but does he fit into that picture? Will he get the minutes with Hugo Ekitike there now? We wait to see.
We do indeed. All right, let's take a break. So much to fit in. When we come back, we'll talk Chelsea. Two key names at the top of their wish list. Plenty of potential exits from Stamford Bridge as well. We'll talk about that, and you can find out which club has agreed a deal to sign Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. That and more to come in the Transfer Show. So much going on in this transfer window, and as usual, Chelsea spending a lot of money. In fact, over £250 million already, James. Are they done?
It's been an eye-catching summer, hasn't it? They've done plenty of business, and they want to sign 2 more forwards in the form of Alejandro Garnacho from Manchester United and Xavi Simons at RB Leipzig. In talks to sign these 2 players, discussions are ongoing. There are good relationships between Chelsea and Manchester United, and Chelsea and RB Leipzig. They've already signed the likes of Liam Delap, João Pedro, Jamie Gittins already in this window, but there will be more signings. But at the same time, Chelsea were fined by UEFA in July for breaching financial rules. They've agreed with UEFA to balance their transfer spending this summer. So basically, they can sign players, but they can only sign players if by the end of the summer they have a positive value. So they're not inflicting or going against any of the rules whatsoever. So they have to have a positive value by the end of the summer. And that means there is going to be plenty of sales between now and the 1st of September.
So who's on their way out of Chelsea?
So many names. I'll rattle through them. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall looks like he's on his way to Everton. Everton and Chelsea have agreed a deal that's worth £29 million, including performance-related add-ons. We reported earlier that Fulham had been looking at Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall earlier on in this transfer window. Looks like he's on his way now to Everton.
It's not worked out for him there, is it? At Chelsea?
Yes and no. I mean, we thought it would, didn't we? Because Enzo Maresca was his manager at Leicester City. Didn't probably get the opportunities he was expecting to get. But there's so many players at Chelsea that he's going to compete with. And at the start of the window, he wasn't one of those names that we expected to leave Chelsea. We thought that he was going to stay. But given the number of players that they've bought and the interest that has been generated in him, Chelsea probably reluctantly have accepted this deal with Everton. Armando Broja. He's still a Chelsea player. He's another player who could be on his way out of Stamford Bridge. Burnley remain in talks with Chelsea over a deal for the striker. There's a broad agreement, we're told, on many aspects of this deal. It's just the structure of that deal that needs to get ironed out between the 2 clubs. Personal terms over a 5-year contract, we believe, are not expected to be a problem. And there seems to be a willingness from the player and both clubs to get this deal over the line.
Does he score enough goals for clubs to be interested in him?
He had that fantastic period, didn't he, with Southampton, particularly in the first half of that season on loan for Southampton, which has carried quite a lot of weight. That's shown he has been able to score goals in the Premier League. He's had terrible injury problems, though, and probably hasn't had the run of games that he would have wanted. If he can get a fresh start and move away from Chelsea on a permanent basis, maybe that might help as well. Give him a home, give him a bit of stability that he knows he's going to be at a certain club for a certain amount of time, with a manager and a club who are going to say, you're our main guy, we want you to start every single game. So maybe that will help someone like Armando Broja to really kickstart his career again and maybe show the form that he did when he played for Southampton. Burnley aren't stopping there with regard to Chelsea players either, because they are close to signing Leslie Ugachukwu. That permanent deal is now agreed. He's agreed a 5-year contract in principle. We think in the next 24 to 48 hours, Ugachukwu will have a medical. They're not the only players who are potentially leaving Chelsea. Mark Guiu, we were speaking about last week, he was supposed to have a medical at Sunderland. I think the flight got postponed, but Keith Downey, our reporter up in the North East, said that hasn't impacted on the deal at all. He is still expected to join Sunderland, and they're also listening to offers for Raheem Sterling, who was on loan at Arsenal last season. He's come back to Stamford Bridge for now, but clearly is not part of the plans under Enzo Maresca, and Carney Chukwuemeka as well. There are a few German clubs who are interested in him.
That's a load of players. Do they have to do that? Do they have to offload these players?
You know what? Financially, they'll probably want to do it just to put themselves in a good position for future transfer windows. But I think just for squad size more than anything else, Chelsea won't want to work with the squad where they've got a set of 20 to 25 players on one side of the training pitch and a load of other players who aren't involved away from the main first team squad. So I think Enzo Maresca will want to work with the squad that he knows is going to be available for him every week.
Yeah, absolutely. James, Dharmesh mentioned Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. What's the latest on him?
Well, things are looking slightly better for Everton now. We spoke last week and David Moyes was very unhappy, wasn't he, on the US pre-season tour, because he said players are turning down Everton. They don't want to sign for Everton. He wants to sign up to 10 players in this transfer window. So it looks like Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall will be on his way. Tyler Dibbling, less sure. Everton have had another bid rejected by Southampton for Tyler Dibbling. So impressive in the Premier League, his first season in the Premier League last season. There's plenty of interest in this player. We understand this was a really significant bid Everton put in, £35 million plus £8 million in add-ons. Southampton now relegated to the Championship. They start their campaign this weekend. They value him at £45 million. So you wouldn't think Everton are too far off. You'd imagine Southampton want a bit more money guaranteed rather than having that £8 million in add-ons. It remains to be seen how high Everton go if they go back in with another bid. We know Everton are desperate to get players in. So much enthusiasm ahead of this new season in a new stadium, but the squad isn't quite there. Yes, they have signed players, but 11 players left in the summer, either in terms of transfers or the end of their contract. So Everton need to do business. David Moyes wants players through the door. This player could light up the Premier League next season in an Everton shirt. Plenty of work to be done. Will they go back in with another bid?
Yeah, we'll see. We know that Pep Guardiola wants a small squad, but actually he's got a massive squad at the moment. So we're looking at outgoings. As soon as we find out, we'll let you know. But you've got news of a player who's staying for a bit longer.
Ruben Diaz, what a time he's had at Manchester City so far since signing in 2020. He's done the treble. He's picked up so much in the form of silverware domestically and in Europe, and he's close to agreeing a new deal with Manchester City for a contract extension. He's got 2 years left on his deal, but he's close to agreeing a new deal. So his deal currently set to expire in 2027. And you mentioned City having a massive squad. Just merely speculating here, looking at the options they have right now, Manuel Akanji, John Stones, Nathan Ake, Josko Vardio, who probably will play as a centre-back this season, with Ryan Aït-Nouri coming in at left-back. You'd think there may be a departure in that area of the pitch, but Ruben Diaz certainly isn't going anywhere.
Did you mention John Stones in that?
Yeah, John Stones, one of those players as well.
Absolutely. Darmish, you were talking about Burnley a bit earlier. We know they've lost James Trafford. Any news on a new number one?
Yeah, they sold James Trafford, didn't they, back to Manchester City for what they believe is a British record for a British keeper. £31 million, even though City only outlaid £27 million. A bit of confusion.
Don't get into that one now.
Yeah, no. So I'm still talking about that in my sleep, if I'm being honest. But the primary target now has emerged for Burnley for a goalkeeper. That is Martin Dubravka from Newcastle United. Interesting, isn't it? Because Newcastle and Manchester City were both after James Trafford. And the two keepers that Burnley were looking at were Stefan Ortega and Martin Dubravka. Well, talks with Newcastle over a permanent deal are progressing, I'm told, and going in a positive direction. He has entered the final year of his contract and they see him as the perfect replacement for James Trafford. So it could be a busy week, this one, for Burnley. We know that clubs like Sunderland and to a lesser extent Leeds United are going for it of the promoted teams. Burnley could have as many as 3 signings this week if it all goes well. Martin Dubravka, Armando Broja and Leslie Ogachukwu.
I'm just being told you've got a line from Liverpool, James.
It's in terms of an outgoing. Tyler Morton, he's completed his medical at Lyon ahead of a completion of a £15 million move from Liverpool. If that deal is complete, then that will make it more than £200 million in terms of player sales Liverpool brought in since the start of last summer. And that explains why they are able to be aggressive in this transfer window. And that explains why they do have the money to spend if they want to go for Alexander Isak.
Indeed. All right, a line from Wolves you've got as well.
Yeah, Gonzalo Guedes, he's heading to Spain to complete a move to Real Sociedad. The two clubs agreeing a fee of £5.2 million. He's set to undergo a medical in Spain and finalise personal terms. He signed from Valencia in 2022. It's been a fairly successful spell at Wolves. 2 years left on his contract. Wolves understood to be pretty happy with the deal. I think they're happy because they've just signed John Arias from Fluminense. I'm so excited to see him play for Wolves this season. He was one of the standout players at the Club World Cup. He's going to create plenty of chances. I'm not saying he's the next Mateus Cunha, but I've got very high hopes for him.
We've got a little bit of time. I want to talk Newcastle again. It seems really tough for them. A really rich club. They've got a bit of money, can't bring players in. Why are they struggling to get players up to Newcastle?
There's a number of players they've gone after in this transfer window. And the first thing to say is 3 years ago, they wouldn't have been targeting these type of players, the likes of Dean Huijsen, the likes of João Pedro, Brian Mbeumo. Every player situation is different. Sometimes it will be a financial point of view. Sometimes it's a family situation about where these players want to go. We'll get right stuck into it at 7 o'clock. But I think the fact they're in the market for these players is really encouraging. But the reason these players don't want to go to Newcastle isn't a case of actively not wanting to go to Newcastle. It's the fact they've had the opportunity to go to other clubs, the likes of Brian Mbeumo. Players have got egos. He wants to be the player to take Manchester United back to where they were. João Pedro, he wants to join a side where he thinks he can win domestic silverware. Perhaps he feels that Chelsea are more likely to win the Premier League in the next few years than Newcastle. I think we shouldn't have a go at Newcastle for not bringing these players in because they are trying to attract the very best players. Also some instability there as well at Newcastle because the sporting director, Paul Mitchell, has left the club. Perhaps these players see the project elsewhere as more stable, more exciting. And clearly, because Newcastle are very recent at this level in terms of the last 20 years, they've not been at this very top level. These other clubs have. They can probably offer more wages while sticking within PSR.
But Dharmesh, they've got Champions League football.
They have. I think it's frustrating for Newcastle United fans and the club because their takeover has happened when these financial fair play and PSR rules have come in. So as much as they had the intention to be wanting to spend hundreds of millions of pounds, simply because of the way the rules are set out, they can't do that. So they need to generate their own money, and that's going to take time.
Yeah.
And sometimes players might think, well, I want the finished project now. Or do I want to be part of the project that's going to take them back?
Let's talk more at 7 because we've run out of time here. Definitely get into that. And we're going to get into this next. What a test series. Brilliant. See you in a moment.